Okay, I believe we are live right now. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shashwat Sumani. I am the chairman of the Retail Committee of PHDCCI. On behalf of PhD, I'm honored to welcome our distinguished dignitaries. Before I express my views further, allow me a couple of minutes to just talk about the amazing work we're doing at PHDCCI. We are an apex chamber of commerce that's been working as a catalyst for promotion of the Indian industry, trade, and entrepreneurship for the past 115 years. It's a forward-looking, proactive, and dynamic pan-India apex organization. As a partner in progress with industry and government, PhD Chamber has a special focus on MSME works at the grassroots level with strong national and international linkages for preparing progress, harmony, and integrated development for the Indian economy. Today, we have a brilliant session ahead. I'll just give a brief introduction of our panelists. Our moderator today is Mr. Girish VS, Executive Director at ISCM. Our panelists include Mr. Bhargav Datta, VP of Aditya Birla Group, Mr. Sumesh Rahavendra, Senior Vice President at Freight Tiger, Mr. Amit Kale, AVP Supply Chain, Reliance Retail, and Mr. G. Ravindran Reddy, AVP at Somani Home Innovation Limited. Thank you all for your presence. I'm going to give a short introduction for the theme for today, and then we can go ahead and get started. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic across the world has been unmatched. It has strongly challenged status quo and forced us to rethink how we live our lives and earn, spend, and save our money. The implications of the pandemic on consumption have been different and diverse. The pandemic exposed just how much of the supply chain can make or break a company's success. It has also revealed hidden vulnerabilities. And in the process, the crisis has moved Chief Supply Chain Officers, or CSCOs, to the forefront of the change. One of the biggest tools CSCOs must utilize is technology. Technology can help the supply chain to bring companies and people closer together in today's global economy. Businesses should time and time again run stress tests to figure out risks within the supply chain, and a business continuity plan should also be predicted, planned, and implemented in an automated manner in case of any disruption of any new kind of crisis. Unfortunately, many companies learn the hard way when it comes to this. It is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and it is not a technology for technology's sake approach. By integrating technology into the supply chain, organizations can attain new levels of supply chain performance, in no small part because of the incremental impact from digital supply chains lies at the cross-functional interfaces. Moreover, companies get this new structure right can also unlock the full creative potential of their workforce, whereas those that lag behind risk performance setbacks with even more shock. This approach, which we call the bionic operating model, which intertwines the best of both man and machine, combining human know-how with the power of AI, data, and analytics, can be used to generate substantial improvements. To tackle the growing challenges, disruptions, and rising market demands, we need smart technology integrated with our rich human capital, which is resilient towards dynamic market and environmental conditions. This session will unearth the industry insights on the digital trends for the adoption and supply chain through experts to meet the challenges of demand forecasting and end-to-end supply chain visibility by building digital bridges that empower industries to look through the fog of crisis towards a new vision for their businesses. I would like to invite all the panelists to share their views in today's subject, building digital bridges across supply chain. I'm sure that the session will entail a better understanding and strategic solutions towards future for the retail supply chain industry. Thank you. Before I hand it off, I would like to give a brief intro of a fantastic moderator for the session. Mr. Girish VS is the Executive Director, Education and Training at ISCM and the editor of SCM Pro Knowledge, a portal for supply chain management professionals. He teaches supply chain management, strategic finance for supply chain, and supply chain risk management. He has more than 30 years of domestic and international professional work experience. Wow. Mr. Girish VS has written on a number of issues on supply chain and is widely published in the press and in research as well. He's a jury member for a few awards and also a TEDx speaker. This is amazing. Off to you, Girishji.
Thank you. Thank you, Shashwat. That was that's a fantastic introduction. Sometimes when others introduce you, you feel, have I done all that? And it also makes me feel a little ancient, talking technology at a time when the average age of the technology geeks are half my age. I welcome all of you, Ravindran, Bhargav, Sumesh. I think Amit will join us a little later. There must be some small problem that he has. One of the significant problems that we have in any conference today is that digitalization and all topics concerned with digitalization are a must-have. And almost every panel will speak on digitalization. So over a period of time, we get an overdose of digitalization, and which is kind of interesting because the previous panel also was hearing there was a lot of talk on control towers and digitalization and technology and how technology should go forward. We will be talking the same issues, but I think we should go a little bit more deeper into what those technology stacks mean and how we can actually develop value out of them, generate value out of technology investments. We have a very interesting set of professionals who are with us today. We have Sumesh, who has worked not only in India, but also overseas and in some of cutting-edge technologies, though his title might not reveal that, but his understanding of technology and use of technology in logistics and supply chain is pretty profound. I had an opportunity to interact with Sumesh a few weeks back. So that's one thing. Bhargav comes from a very strong analytic background. Ravindran is, again, from a user perspective. And we have Amit Kale, who is from the retail side of it. So we will have different perspectives and each of us have different views on what this topic means. It's essentially trying to bring in digitalization into supply chains. Now I would like to start with Sumesh. The reason I'm starting with Sumesh is also that, I believe Sumesh is at the at the convergence of the user and the technology, trying to decode and make technology friendly enough for users to use it without having to worry about upfront capex. So Sumesh, if I could start with you on to what your views on digitalization or your views on the subject are, and then we could quickly have a round of that before we get into our questions.
Yeah, thanks, Girish. I think the question, share your views on digitalization, always throws me off a little bit, right? Because where do you start? But I think the way we like to look at digitalization, and we work in a small but powerful and important vertical in terms of trying to digitize freight across the supply chain of an organization, right? And today, if you look at, the word digitalization is thrown around a lot, right? And half the time we're not even sure that, people really understand what their North Stars are, what their goals are, and what does success look like once you've actually, once you're well underway, the process of digitalization as such. So, instead of sort of looking at and painting a sort of somewhat vague picture, maybe I can sort of talk about certain concrete examples that the lack of digitalization is causing today, right? And these are some of my favorite examples as well, right? Let's take the average sort of Indian truck today that is sort of plying on the highways, transporting goods. And if you look at, some of the key metrics for these trucks, right? Let's start with maybe the daily utilization. And typically, daily utilization of a truck that's transporting something on road is measured by the total distance it travels per day, right? And it's one of the simpler measures. And today, if you look at, the daily distance that a truck does on the Indian roads is anywhere between sort of 250 to 400 kilometers, assuming they drive through for a large part of the day, right? But then you look at the West and you look at, be it North America or Europe, where they do sort of 700, 800 kilometers a day. Even if you look at some of the other emerging countries, where they're able to cover, 500 to 600 kilometers a day. And this is a significant difference, right? And to the sort of average person, while these numbers may not be as relevant, from a supply chain efficiency, utilization, cost saving perspective, these are huge, right? Because essentially, if you're able to use technology to not only track and create visibility on your supply chain layer, but you're able to use technology to drive better utilization of your fleet. You understand what are the nuances, what are the barriers to this utilization, and you're able to solve for them, be it poor infra by taking, better navigation, better roads, be it, understanding what type of trucks are sort of involved in the process, and how do you better utilize trucks for long haul versus short haul. Like, these are all planning and optimization technologies that exist today, but are not being used to a large degree, right? And this is sort of one of the simpler use cases, right? The second one, as an example, if you look at it, the other utilization metric is called empty running, right? And today, this is basically defined by, percentage of distance traveled without any load, right? And in India today, this can go, between sort of 30 to 45%, right? Now imagine the prime purpose of a truck is to carry loads, right? And if you have trucks that are up to 40% of the time actually not carrying a load, now imagine, Girish, if someone said, 40% of the time, Girish, you don't need to moderate some of these conferences. I mean, you're going to be like, oh, what do I do? From that perspective, we need to be able to, better utilize these trucks, right? I mean, in the West, this empty running can be as low as sort of 12, 13%, right? And this is not only is a efficiency and cost problem, but it's also an environmental problem, right? More trucks plying on the road, not doing what they're meant to do, means there's more emissions that were actually not necessary, right? So these are, I can sort of go on, but in the interest of letting other people talk, these are some of the use cases where I see, tangibly, the adoption and transformation to a digitally driven organization can do good not only for the organization, but for the ecosystem and then the environment as a whole, right? So yeah, that's some of the examples where, and that we're sort of actively working on as well.
Thanks, Sumesh. In fact, it is Amit has joined us. Amit is the AVP of Sourcing and Supply Chain at Reliance Retail. And his specialization has been in packaging, and in fact, he has won numerous awards for packaging. Welcome, Amit.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Yes, the problem with what we have in India and in a lot of spaces is, yes, we are a lot behind the curve when it comes to use of technology, adoption of technology. One of the things that the pandemic did do, and I think that as a favor to the technology perspective, pandemic, brought focus on two areas in supply chain. One of it is technology. To that extent, I think software vendors should be the happiest people, because everyone now talks technology and digitalization as being the way to go for supply chains. And the second part, of course, is resilience. Resilience is nothing else but a function of your visibility into your supply chain, into how deep you can look into your supply chain, can look into your deep players and anticipate the kind of challenges that the deep players have, and how long before they roll up and hit you. So to that extent, yes, we need the right amount of investments in supply chain. The other part where today people are talking about, again, is because of this huge disruption we have had in understanding demand. There was a time, in fact, probably when I come to Bhargav, we will pick this up in a little bit more detail. History has now become just that, history. The history of pre-2020 data and its implications or its ability or our ability to use that in understanding future trends. I'm not sure how closely correlated those past trends of pre-COVID data with post-COVID demand patterns would be. After talking with a number of industry stalwarts, we did recognize that, and they also did tell us that demands the nature of demand has shifted, the kind of products demanded by customers have shifted, buy has shifted, and the way they want it fulfilled has shifted. So we are looking at an entirely new spectrum of customer perspective from which we have to look at fulfillment. And that in turn will call for quicker and faster collection of data. That in turn will call for quicker understanding of looking at patterns within the data and understand what exactly works at this point in time. I would like to then bring in Amit into this picture at this point in time. Amit, if you can give us an overview of, what digitalization, how will you use digitalization in the retail industry?
Yeah, thanks, Girish, for adding me in. And I think this is a very relevant topic that we are discussing today. Digitization, as you know, we can see the entire world is now getting transformation and getting transformed into a digital way of life. And supply chain per se, yes, definitely we will have a lot of benefits, which I can see is number one, if we have, which I think we already have implemented a lot of this RFID and tracking system, whereby we know exactly where our vehicle is right now. Thereby, we can have a better estimation on the lead time of delivery. So that is one part of it. Second, since a lot of these trucks, as someone just pointed out that a lot of these trucks have to come back empty, and thereby, a lot of about 40% of vehicles on the roads are empty. So if we are able to locate our truck and we know that what time it is going to deliver the goods, then probably we can also plan better, and we can also have a return load, if possible, collected at our warehouses where it can be, this truck can be utilized, and we can also save a lot of money in terms of freight charges. So, visibility is the key, I believe, today. And if we are able to track and trace the entire movement of these locomotives, and we know the exact position, then we can plan better. And today, a lot of emphasis is given on having inventory norms which are less, So we are talking about 30 days DOH or maybe 15 days DOH in warehouses. So if we are able to predict these lead times, and if we are able to track where our transport is right now, where it is, and if we have data whereby we understand that where it is taking a majority of time for the delivery to happen. So, for example, if either it is waiting at the toll nakas or at some of the government check nakas, or whether the truck driver is taking a rest somewhere. So we can have a proper analysis of where exactly this time can be saved, whereby we can reduce this delivery lead time, and thereby we can again reduce our inventory norms, and which in turns gives us a lot of saving. So I think this is what we are looking at. And many a times we have seen that the trucks are already arrived, but there is already a load of for unloading, which is causing delay in terms of the vehicle is kept on hold for almost 2 days, sometimes 3 days, sometimes a week for getting unloaded. So if we have this kind of visibility, we can plan better. We can have the docks available, and we can, as soon as the trucks are arrived, we can probably tell them to move at particular dock for unloading, where the team is already waiting. So all this can be, the supply chain efficiency in real terms can be brought into this, if we are able to achieve the kind of digital transformation that we are hoping to achieve. Yes, this pandemic has put a slight, I should say, comma to the growth of digital transformation. But I am sure as soon as we are over this, we will again get back to digital transformation and help achieve this, the dream that we are having today. Thank you.
Yes, yes, the pandemic did put a pause, but it also has given us some kind of an push in terms of looking at all these areas.
Yeah, absolutely. But only my concern is that since all this was happening operationally at the ground level, so this is now suddenly not being prioritized. So this is so because of the pandemic, we have other issues to fight on. So, so this is why I'm saying it is put just a comma and not a full stop.
Yes.
So we will definitely relook at it.
Yes. In fact, if I were to bring Bhargav, Bhargav, if you can expose what is your view of how do you interpret this whole area?
Yeah, so definitely one thing is definitely it is pre-COVID and post-COVID. that bifurcation has happened last year, no doubt, no question about that. Now the point is that depending on the digitalization or digital maturity that the organization was having by that when this bifurcation happened, and that has actually helped that particular respective organization in reaching that BUA, business as usual level in a shorter duration. That is what in fact we have observed within our ABC group also. Just to give you a background, because I am part of the corporate function, so I have visibility across our group businesses, and and all are not at the same digital maturity in terms of digitalization. That is a harsh reality. And to your at the very beginning, you have mentioned about like this is very vaguely word term nowadays, digitalization. For some people, it is like having Teams meeting, Zoom meeting, also digitalization. Okay, that is what I have seen. So that is a reality. That is a maturity across all, right? But having said that, it's not that all things are that bad. Our group I will talk about primarily from a group perspective and few business houses. Over the last 5-6 years, in fact, the investment in this digital transformation side has been really good. I would say really in a better shape than many other organizations that I have observed and experienced in my life. I will give you an example from the cement and metal companies that we have, Ultratech and Hindalco. So at the group level, we at any day, any time during a normal business day, roughly about 25,000 to 30,000 trucks run across India any day at any point in time. So that's a huge transaction anyway. Now, when during over the last 4 to 5 years, since 5-6 years past, the group has been investing in lots of technologies in terms of visibility that Mr. Amit has mentioned about. And in fact, for large, almost I would say in the metal and cement business, more than 50% of our volume we track through GPS devices. So we have good amount of visibility in terms of where is my truck currently. And now I would like to connect with some points that Sumesh has mentioned about empty miles, which is a real problem, even at the group level also, because we have multiple business lines. And we evaluated internally also. We have been evaluating, actually not just completed, that how we can bring that group synergy. How I can use the same truck from cement carrying, then metal carrying purpose, then coal transportation, and all these things, right, internally. But at the same time, I also have trucks from my chemical business, my pulp and fiber business, which may not be directly fungible for this kind of other operations. So considering all these aspects, the group in our group, we have already created good amount of data ecosystem. This is actually we already done before pandemic time. And that visibility in terms of where, how, and what type of trucks and the supplier profile, those things already we created a good foundation. Now, what happened during basis on that, we have been improving our overall efficiency and understanding the backhauling opportunity within the group synergy, leveraging group synergy. Then also, because that if I look at from a cost perspective, the four basic lever. One is of course that reduction of empty mile. Then you have we have reduction of loading unloading time. That is another important point. Then one related to empty mile is directly correlated is the identification of next lot of demand, right? Where I can go quickly to find the next demand. So that will in turn help me in reducing the empty mile. So that is like my demand aggregation perspective. And last piece, of course, in transit, overall transit time reduction. So these are the four levers typically we identified will help directly, not only cost saving, but also from the sustainability perspective. And from that perspective, to achieve these four, to attack these four levers, fundamental things that was first fundamental thing is the traceability and visibility, which Mr. Amit has mentioned. Then creating the data infrastructure to have mined those data. Now, in this case, data is not related to your transactional data only, but those GPS-based IoT data. Plus, in fact, we are also mining Google Map related map-based API data as well, because I am also bringing in the information related to traffic pattern, type of road, all these things. Then also this toll naka info, all these things we are bringing in, right? So then this is a second piece of data. Third piece, what we are bringing the analytics layer on top of that, identifying the pattern with respect to which route is having what kind of pattern in terms of transit time, in terms of waiting time, in terms of overall loading, unloading, all these things. So we are trying to bring we are still not completed, but we are trying to bring all these things in one layer of data and analytics platform. And then in fact, because we have done lots amount of work on this side, so when pandemic struck to us, and when last year around late March the full lockdown happened, then slow unlocking started happening from May onwards. This ecosystem has helped us in quickly laying out the supply formulation, from which area to where I can easily start my transportation, my goods transportation, where I have my supply availability, because that times driver availability, truck availability also has a problem. So all these things we were able to quickly address. And almost by June, our business almost reached at 80 to 85% of pre-pandemic level last year. So that is something what we were able to do. And eventually by the year end, actually our business, even we grown more than what we had in last fiscal. But yeah, so that is what I would say the perspective. But at the same time, I would say that it is not same for all. Some businesses still struggle in terms of identifying those areas of pockets of problem, because they were not having the data and other ecosystems ready. So that is what would be my take on these things.
There is a huge organizational culture and overhang on all digitalization efforts. And, this has been always there. If you look at the way we looked at it when CRM was a hot topic, I remember people, buying an emailing solution and call that we have a CRM system in place. We kind of stretch our small bits of technology and give it a nice spin to make us all feel good. Ravindran, if I were to ask you to give us your first opening remarks on the topic.
Good, great. Few points like, when I was listening to, Mr. Amit, Sumesh, and even Bhargav, there are two kind of logistics, which is like a long distance, point to point, I would say, manufacturing to warehousing, warehouse to or mother warehouse to a branch or a location warehouse. Now, these are the places where, surely since these are point to point, which is still very well monitored, control via digital, still this is a controlled environment, your logistics partner, what material is going in, what material should reach out, still there are a lot of technology, every one of us in some stage or other already invested, thanks to the SAP evolution or ERP evolution, I think we all of us got through that. At least we know what we shipped and what has arrived. At least that problem has been solved. What pandemic has done to all of us is the consumer expectation from all of us as a brand. One, safe and hygiene logistics is a new expectation where they are not being prey of the people who are delivering them. We heard a lot of food joint delivery guys being the source or spreader. That's another fear. Many of us are into consumer goods. Since I have been associated with a lot of consumer goods, this door-to-door delivery is a common in every organization. From a manufacturing to a warehouse, it's still very much control of one. The battle has been won to a certain level, I would say. The real challenge is to our last mile logistics. Where the consumer anxiety, we are used to typical .coms environment, and they give you decent visibility of your order booking to whether it is dispatched or where it has reached and all. You can track yourself. A consumer can track. I'm not talking about the organization, but my entire focus is consumer. Today, consumer want the best product. They don't mind paying price, but that doesn't mean they will pay exorbitantly. There's nothing called overspending to anything. Even if you give him a 1 million rupee product for which he's ready to pay, it is value which he is buying, not rather the product. But what visibility we think, what confidence do we give it to him that he has been transferred with all the hygiene care? Because within the system, logistics has been well in control, but the kind of unorganized sector which is happening on a last mile delivery is something which need a evolution. I think it is still work in progress. I think a lot of big organizations, small organizations working on logistics in some way or the other, making sure, giving a confidence to consumer today. As a marketer, I may have to communicate that also, that your product has been handled with the utmost care. They had been checked on temperature every day. They have been done COVID test every now and then, so that they are not this spreader. I'm saying, because what consumer buy is confidence from you, and surely he trusts that you giving a best product on it. When I was thinking about a typical blockchain, that's a global buzzword. Beyond Bitcoins, we all understand the role of a blockchain. Because these small time logistics partners, they are not integrated to any system. They are still standalone somewhere. Some are good, some are excellent, some are ugly. But they are not in common, and visibility of them and transparency of them is so very poor that all of us are suffering. And then, opportunity for every organization to invest so much for the last mile, but at the end of the day, it is brand and consumer. Everything else is a bridge. Today, we're talking about digital bridge is just a communication bridge within the organization or to the end consumer. Consumer is hungry for information, what's happening to his product. We live in an environment where people think material should be delivered like OTP delivers in 5 seconds. So if they order, their delight will be as expectation like an OTP that you order and people are there at the doorstep knocking bell, here am I. That would be the last mile expectation of a 5-second or a 10-second kind of a thing. But what is the integration of digital to be a last mile? And more than that, it has happened in many sectors, but it is required in many of the product sectors. How this entire logistics and entire supply chain gets into a blockchain kind of environment. As you know, the blockchain environment is not built by one, it is built by many, but it has a shared responsibility rather than one organization responsibility. Doing that, it's like a typical hub and spoke model where every spoke can become a hub and every hub can become a spoke. The visibility will help the entire industry. Today, no organization has a leverage of spending more or charging more from its consumer. Okay, being optimistic to every offering is the requirement. As there were people talking of, if blockchain is really very effective, people will be very clear where is the load. There is no chance for empty trucks to move around the market if there is a clear transformation information. And the trucks are not, unless until it is a category specific truck, which is an inflammable category, and other which is a different requirement as such. But general movement, you can have a better utilization of the resources available. Despite increasing number of trucks in the country, we still face a logistic issue that 4-day lead time is still 5 days or 6 days. There is a long lead time of unloading, loading. I think even in the blockchain, government of India becomes a partner to it. Even the government, people like us will not be worried about whether the toll tax has been paid rightly, wrongly, justifiedly or not. And it can be prepaid from the company directly, if it has to save the cost and look into the transparency to the organization. But cutting the entire story short, what end consumer expect from any brand for that matter, be it an industrial good, be it a consumer good, is transparency, and whatever you say, communicate to us and deliver on time. And there's no compromise of a damage, no compromise on the quality of product getting deteriorated, and then no compromise as such that you will charge him more. If you give him a good logistic, doesn't mean you can ask him a premium for it. So digital is a basic health and hygiene for today's world. And I think in today's expectation on any level is very, very high. But consumer expectation to get their product well intact, on time, without any hassle, and it should perform well is the least bare minimum expectation. Anything above that delight, I think we have most grounds to cover.
Yes, thanks. In fact, there are a couple of issues which you have brought out, which probably feeds into what Sumesh would want to address in terms of, yes, the ecosystem needs to be digitalized for supply chains to get digitalized. If we have pockets of darkness, then the visibility is no more there. And two, some of these people would not have the ability to actually invest the kind of money needed for, and this again brings up the whole question of, should I own technology or should I lease technology? Which is a right, today I don't think ownership of technology gives you any great benefits. In fact, I would see it rather as a threat, because technology changes and you're left with an old technology. While Sumesh, what are your thoughts on that direction? And add to it, if you could also spend some time discussing on how do you convert this visibility into value?
Yeah, thanks, Girish. On a side note, Ravindran, we should definitely sync at some point. We've solved a lot of the problems that you described, so I'm sure we'll be able to add some value.
That's why I brought you in directly there.
That aside, I think, Girish, obviously I have somewhat of a vested interest to say you should lease technology and not build your own, right? It's in my interest to say that. But having said that, I think it depends on what the strategic imperative for any given organization is. And it goes back to what you consider your core, right? Today, if let's say there is an organization that is manufacturing tiles or appliances, I would argue that transportation is not your core. So why would you spend time, money, energy trying to build technology that sort of will drive your supply chain and transportation? That's kind of the main reason you have organizations that provide software and solutions as a service. If your strategic imperative is transportation is so core to your business, as an example, if you're to some extent in the e-commerce industry, if you're getting into the transportation space yourself, if you're in the warehousing space, then there is an argument to be made that, hey, actually transportation could be considered more core to my business. And therefore, I don't necessarily want to lease out my technology needs. This is something that I'm in it for the long term, and therefore I want to invest and build my own tech stack that will serve my needs specifically, right? So I would say it depends on what the strategic imperative is before you actually make the decision of whether to buy or lease, which is sort of such a classical discussion, right? We have it all the time.
Yes.
Now, in terms of there is so much, and building is only step one, right? Continually optimizing for the various challenges, nuances is, I would argue, probably even more important and probably more complex as you get in, right? I mean, if there is an organization, even if it's a very large organization, a global company, that is trying to build its own, middleware or even its own tech stack for its supply chain optimization and deliveries, I would argue that, over a period of time, you need to make sure that you are continually investing in the system, right? And way too many times we've seen new leadership changes, changes in strategy, changes in sort of priorities, budgetary restrictions, etc., coming through. And the non-core projects are some of the first ones to be sort of taken off the list, right? And so therefore, over a period of time, it actually can give you a significant disadvantage if you're looking to sort of build something on your own. And so, but as I said, if it's core to you, then you probably have an advantage because the focus will always be there on it. So that's sort of the first part of the question. The second part of the question, I think, is the actual and tangible value that something like visibility can bring is as much about the technology, Girish, as it is about the ability and aptitude for an organization to actually utilize the data and generate real-time action based on insights, right? I mean, we're fortunate enough that a lot of our large customers take the visibility data that we provide and the insights that we provide, over a period of time, and actually act on them. We have weekly reviews with, very, very large companies that actually, sometimes tell us some of the actions they're taking based on the insights that we've generated. Because when you solve for that, it's a significant value add, both in terms of speed, efficiency, and cost, right? We have one of the largest cement companies in India who's a customer of ours, and their CEO came up with a pretty large vision, right? They said, we want to deliver cement in 24 hours. Next day delivery. If Amazon can do it, then so can we, right? So 24. I mean, next day delivery in a space like cement is fairly complex, right? But in order to be able to do that, the visibility layer, the control tower layer on top of that, the interventions and the insights that you generate as a result of that becomes pretty critical to achieving a vision like that, right? Diversion of trucks is a pretty common problem in the industry, and we help companies save tens of lakhs of rupees a month by generating insights on how to better manage their diversions, and looking at how, at a transporter level, at a lane level, at a truck level, at a logistics service provider level, who are some of these contributors to these inefficiencies, right? And so it's a fairly complex topic, but there is a significant amount of gains to be had if done right, and if you're able to generate the right insights. See, visibility is only one thing. I mean, anyone can slap a GPS device on a truck and say, okay, now you can track it, right? What do you do as a result of that trackability? And what do you do as a result of all the collective wisdom and insights you generate? Today, when we track for one customer, it's not just one customer, right? We track for hundreds of customers. And as a result, we continuously generate insights and data that gives us visibility into what's happening across industry, across many industries, right? And as a result, we're able to build on top of these insights and optimize continuously, that we then offer every customer as a benefit. So there are multiple things that are involved here, and also I'm aware that I've been speaking for about 7 minutes now, so I'll wrap up. But those are some of the more tangible examples of how we can sort of add value from something as broad as what people call visibility.
Yes, yes. Thanks for that nuanced play on lease versus own. It's also very important for people to understand what do I do with technology and how do I implement technology, because most users are not technology players. Their primary business is not technology. Their primary business is cement or appliances or whatever it is. And therefore, having a partner who can actually interpret the technology trend for them and ensure that the technology that they are using or they are betting on continues into the future. And in case it changes, there is a partner who will handhold them through that change is also pretty much important when it comes to making investments into technology. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to look at it from that point of view. Now, again, when I come back to it, there is this, I'll again come back to Bhargav probably for this. Bhargav, the reason, you did also point out the fuzziness of the word digital. There are simply too many technologies that are out there. Today we have everyone talking about AI and ML in their whole suite of applications. It might be as simple as having a static website, but that person will claim to have used. We keep getting people who will say that we use AI ML to find out who is the candidate who can be good for you for training. I said, wow, that's something that everyone wants to talk AI ML language today. But if I were to ask, however, if I look at it from an organization perspective, most of organizations today, the large ones at least, have an ERP in place. Therefore, they have some amount of data. Some of them have got peripheral systems which collect data. But these data is all in those specific systems. So some people have got a data warehouse or a data lake or data, probably we might now call it data ocean. Companies have trouble scaling their digital assets, especially data assets. What do you think is a way forward for looking at it from this perspective?
Yeah, so yeah, this is a very pertinent problem, and across the board of CIOs, across our group companies, we have observed. And because as you rightly pointed out, almost all large organizations, at least in our group, we have invested heavily on ERP systems, and almost everyone is on some of other ERP systems. Largely it is SAP based, and some people are on the Oracle side as well. Now, having invested crores of rupees in these systems, and now being the next gen of AI ML thing, if I go there and tell them, okay, you guys are not doing this, they will they will just close the door to us. Okay, that is a harsh reality. So now typically the approach what we take it, if you go to technology players, they will simply come and tell you, okay, implement cloud technology. That is the word they will be using. You can use AWS, Azure, and all these things. But the fundamental question is, do we actually need all these things right away? So that is the point people need to understand. At least the CIO community, they should understand that perspective, that what is the right time to migrate to a complete cloud infrastructure, whether it is right away or maybe few years down the line. So typically, and also these ERP systems also do have their own benefits. It's not that we can simply discard them because of this cloud technology, because they are designed for specific purpose of business KPI tracking, primarily from the business KPI tracking perspective, and which is a fundamental need for any CXO, right? So that is also will be also needed. So that from that considering that perspective in mind, typically in our at AVG level, what we are adopting something like hybrid based approach, hybrid technology approach, where we will be having ERP system, and at the same time we will be also having cloud based infrastructure, but not for all type of all business problems or all business functions. But but basic fundamental would be that they will be talking to each other. That is the main fundamental need would be there. Now I will give you some example how and why this is going getting useful for us. Although we have been using it across all the supply chain functions, procurement, logistics, inventory, everywhere we are doing infant forecasting also. But I will take the logistics example only because we are talking on logistics primarily. So from the logistics perspective, the three fundamental objective from the business perspective is to, of course, the cost improvement, and then service level. Either you maintain and improve. Of course, there is no question of reducing your service level. Third is safety and sustainability, which is also becoming very important nowadays. Now to address all these things, first level of visibility is always, it is fundamental need. We should not talk about that again, because we are beyond visibility, to be frank. Everything needs to be beyond visibility now. What is as Sumesh rightly said, what value we are bringing out of that visibility layer? So that is an important point. Now to make that happen, from the transactional ERP data system perspective, we know how my overall demand flow is happening. What are all my logistics player working? What type of trucks? What size of capacity and all these things? How long it is taking? Those information I know, right? From the transactional data, and from there I do know a baseline information that okay, for this pocket of destinations, this is my typical freight cost. This is my typical on journey time, or this is the way of improving my journey time, and also some similar thought. This is basic exploratory kind of analytics. We call it in analytics domain. Now beyond that, how I can now beyond that, the question is that how I can still reduce my cost. That is one thing, and how I can still improve my customer service level. Sumesh was mentioning about 24 hours. In fact, we are delivering at 4 hours in some of the locations. That is how our commitment level in our cement industry. Within 4 hours, we have to deliver the whatever order we are getting it. Of course, it is not across India everywhere for 4 hours. Typically, it is 24 hours, but almost 20-30% business we are moving towards a 4 hours window now. Now, how that thing needs to happen, right? So for that purpose, now I know from my transactional data, okay, this is the typical pattern. Now I need to improvise on top of that. Now I need to bring the other surrogate data, other kind of data from the, I was mentioning about map-based API, right? From map-based API, and also I know my GPS ping from my GPS data. That's also I'm having every minute, every second. Now, basis on all this data, now these data are not transactional, and these are kind of between structured and unstructured kind of data. Now, and this is a humongous volume as against transactional data. This is because 30,000 trucks I am running every day, and every second I am getting GPS ping, and a huge data. Now, managing those data and using those data with map API, identifying the pattern of journey, identifying how long, what are those bottleneck locations. Then also using information related to traffic, using information related to like information like entry restriction in certain locations, right? All these things affect my overall journey in terms of delivery commitment. And that in turn also affect my overall turnaround time. That again affect my asset utilization perspective and affecting the cost. Now what the value that we need to bring in, that in addition to transactional data, this other data, GPS data, map-based data, which is humongous in size, I need to be able to mine those data, process that data, and also bring those AI. Then comes those AI/ML layer, not before that. Before that, it is simple exploratory analytics, right? So this is where thought process need to go. And for that to happen, eventually we cannot rely on ERP systems. That is the truth. And we are adopting that hybrid based approach, traditional ERP plus cloud based infrastructure, and bringing everything together and deliver the value out of all these things. So that is what we are trying to build and progressing. Few things we have already implemented, and few are there in pipeline.
Yes, interesting. In fact, I did some close work with Ultratech, and Ultratech 7x7, 7x7, right?
7x7, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting experiment, and it has worked out very well in some areas.
Correct.
60% of your deliveries are now Ultratech 7x7.
Yep.
Very interesting, and again, you need a huge amount of data, and your whole view of looking at data in terms of and moving it up, and when to bring in AI ML, that also is a very interesting insight that you have provided. Ravindran, if I were to come back to you as a user, there are two things that are crucial to us when we start looking at digitalization. Everyone has talked about how great digitalization can be, how much of benefits it can bring. In fact, I also remember reading a McKinsey article where they have said that people who bring in, digitalization, their EBITDAs will be going up by a few percentage points and stuff like that. Great to hear. It says we'll become more flexible, we'll become faster, we'll become accurate. But then what prevents us from digitalization?
Okay, I will talk about, since I represent, my key focus is generally end consumer, Yeah. I said, majority of your digitization is more of a internal consumption need. Still many organization has not progressed towards the last mile logistics. It is still subcontracted. Okay. Today we live in another buzzword, D2C. A big automobile giant is also talking about D2C. Small FMs, the biggest giant of FMCG is talking about D2C. A new startup into beauty is talking about D2C. So when you talk D2C, is direct to consumer, is like last mile logistics. You may say 1,000 things about long term, when we talk about capital goods, there are a lot of talks about capacity catering. Can we deliver a truckload in 7 hours, 4 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, 500 miles in 3 days, whatever kind of a situation, which are big ticket, point to point kind of a logistics onto it. Today we live in D2C. So even today, RCC kind of a product will also work on a D2C if that's a business making sense for them. They say that even an individual house builder, if they order me, how do I deliver him on a 24 hours on a D2C basis? So now problem is, half of our India, which we very fashionably call them mom and pops, or sometimes we call them unorganized, which holds a major chunk of business. And to them, we just know how to reach out to them, but we don't know how to reach out to further to consumer. There was another buzzword which came in last Corona time, post April, May, O2O, online to offline. That was a new buzzword at that point of time, online to offline, because there was visibility till certain point of time, and when the visibility ends, the offline comes in, which means reaching out to the end consumer where the digitalization network has broken. You have relying still on the offline partner. I think there are two things. There are one, very, rightfully a couple of moments back, you point of whether we should own technology or not, or whether we should take lease of technology or not. All depends on the business, so-called business ROI. Not every business need everything. If I'm in a business of a typical FMCG and I need to sell candies, my ROI for a candy should suit my kind of working. And, everything has an industry size and per unit cost. I may have the best of the logistics available in India. If I use my cost of delivering to my end consumer goes up. One of the question you asked many of the other participants is, what will digitalization add value?
Yes.
A value to whom? When it is a capital good, end consumer is a industry. When it is a consumer good, the end value consumer is the end consumer. It could be a product of 10 rupee bug, or it could be a product of maybe a 10,000 or a 1 million rupee. Depends on what the product it is. Today we deal in such kind of products. Today I deal in a products from anything from a 1,500 rupee to as good as 40,000, 50,000. I need a logistic to be as optimized as it could be, But at a certain point of time, I will also compromise, saying that cost of digitization should not disturb my overall value chain. At the end of the day, in price structure, I'm responsible for my board, to my board members. If I'm a listed organization, I'm responsible for my promoters. I'm responsible. More than that, all of us are responsible for the consumer. The consumer need value in form of good product, great product, on-time product, basic, but nothing called over the value cost. Over engineering is a one word which I have heard over the time in many product related, since I look into product part of aspects also. There are a lot of people who come back and say, a dealer or distributor comes back, over engineering product hai. So you're given too many features which is not required, kind of a thing. Sometime, or sometimes you do few features which are ahead of time. 5 years back, IoT was ahead of time. And today, IoT is a reality. It's a comfort rather than, so-called technology jargon. It's not a technology jargon anymore. So I think at the end of the day, digitalization is extremely important today. One, when we started seeing that D2C is a new way of living. I think biggest brands want their D2C share go down from 10% to 20%. That's what they're expecting. I'm talking about typical distribution-led organization. I'm not talking about B2B organization, which is any which was D2C. But at somewhere down the line, I think a huge amount of effort, because a lot of effort has happened between organization and channel partners. I mean to say logistics partners. Not much has happened between the organization and the distributor and retailer points. Retailers who are smart, so-called regional retail, what we call nowadays, or modern retail, they are smarter than the other people. In fact, they are better than the MNC partners. Since they know how to interact with their consumer, they know their local culture, they understand the nuances of how to communicate in the vernacular language, how to communicate. We may get delayed. That's the best way of telling. We may get delayed is the last thing which any brands do. Everyone says we will be delivering by that time. We may get delayed because of rain, because of flood, because of earthquake, because of just like any other day. I think that communication of digital is not all the time showing that my material has reached to your the nearest chaurasta and it will come in 5 minutes to your data. Not all the time is required, because consumer has that expectation. But as a D2C is a new future, I think at least for next 5 years, this buzzword will live with us. I don't know what, again, as you say, technology may take a new steep. You never know. We'll start delivering from the manufacturing unit directly to home. We may not have the other partners as such of so-called large-scale logistics, but surely there would be something called large-scale logistics and last-mile logistics somewhere on the line, hub and spoke. But I would say, what blockchain has not been able to deliver. I have coming back to again and again on a blockchain saying is I think this concept like internet has not evolved. Internet is no more today. In last Corona, I think the affordability of internet has not created panic in our society. Had there been an affordability issue to use this technology of internet, there would have been huge amount of crisis in work from home also, because that would have added additional number of cost to the people or even to the company. But if we have to live in D2C environment, I think we need last mile connectivity, we need last mile information and simple solution. I think non-IoT based solution or IoT based solution, both what will make a consumer consume that technology. And a technology doesn't mean too much cost. I think today that aspect for both shareholders, stakeholders, promoters, and consumer makes a lot of things. I'm sure a lot of people who are in logistics, this pressure comes back to you from our product and brand teams, and even from the top management. How do we reduce cost of logistics? Something which is uncontrollable is the international or the import and export logistics. We understand how this has changed the entire price structure in India in last 6 months. Things of $1,800 have become $2,800, $2,600, and it has changed the entire price structure onto it. What digital would have helped us is how do we share loads between our own organization, between the other organization, without compromising on the quality of deliveries, without compromising on the damage. The physical damages still really exist. The logistics also still face physical damage. And I think in today's era, nobody has patience to hear that is a transit damage. So I think we live in that era and we have to make sure that happens despite whatever efficiency you give on visibility through digital.
Yeah, interesting. You did bring up some interesting concepts of cost to serve. Can my product afford the kind of technology I need? If I were to now look at the whole process of any investment that goes into technology, there are basically the triangle which you need to balance: service, cost, and capital. If we do not balance it right, the organization suffers. And if you balance it right, it gives you the agility and the request and the ability to see forward and anticipate and plan and do things well. Getting that mix right is a problem for a lot of people. And therefore, one of the first questions that would again come up is that, how do I prioritize? How should what is a kind of, which are the areas where I should invest? And along with it, what are the technologies that I should choose? Bhargav, if I could ask you that.
So from the prioritizing perspective, you are
yes.
thinking, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it has to be aligned from the vision and leadership perspective as well. Eventually, so that would be the starting point. Because to be frank, there are many things to do, and your chief marketing officer or chief manufacturing officer, they would say, I need all these things, but of course they also understand it is not possible. So, but the truth is that they will say, okay, I need everything as soon as possible. So now it is our job how to even by heart, they also know it is not possible. It is, of course, they want to push for as much as possible the transformation as quickly as much possible. Now, considering that point in mind, it becomes imperative for us to connect. Here, actually, that point is very important. Connecting with the business need and translating that to my technology and data analytics need, right? So that connection we have to make it. Couple of things we need to keep in mind. One is, of course, from business priority, still I will get some priority list, at least top three. What is the top 3 priority? Definitely I will get it from the leadership layers. That is typically we do. Top 3, what is your top 3 main need, right? So that is the first fundamental thing. Now, to have those top 3 things into action, we need to get into the grounding or baselining work of understanding the data maturity, current data maturity, current technology maturity within the organization. I'm not, till now I'm not going outside. Okay? I am looking at internally. Then and then that we first understand, and then basis on the current as it is maturity in terms of data and technology, typically what we do, we lay out the foundation for some kind of the roadmap that what can be achieved in next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and 3 years, right? So that is what we do. And when it goes beyond 6 months to 12 months, that time for those initiatives to achieve the objective to achieve, we also highlight what this new technology or new infrastructure needs to be adopted. So that is how we typically do the prioritization in our work at this moment. So I'll again give you some example in this case. I'll take this time. I will not take logistic example. I will take from the okay. I'll take example from the SNOP perspective. Okay, so we had a traditional, uh, quite robust. I would say it's not a basic one. Quite robust SNOP planning for. I will take the same example again, and that used to do some kind of basic forecasting, and not very, I would say, not very rigorously used, but some method they had. But primarily it is driven by sales team. That Delphi method eventually everyone follow at, as per the actual execution. That has been the tradition 1 year back. And it is about kind of monthly they were doing, and they were not doing anything beyond monthly. Of course, strategic planning is there yearly and by 3 yearly, but I'm talking about operational perspective. But then because this industry has evolved, and also at ABZ, we have grown inorganically organically in last 5-6 years through lots of M&As as well. We have lots of M&As in last 5-6 years. Our capacity increased by almost 56. And now because of that, what happened? The demand pattern changed, and to meet those demand pattern, the logistics infrastructure also become a challenge. How to meet those demand pattern, and then because of such tremendous growth, we have the business team has realized that any static planning for every month may not be fruitful, because they are observing some kind of customer service level issues in terms of identifying right infrastructure, right transporter people, and all these things, right? So then we work with the business, and we conceptualize the a concept called dynamic SNOP. How we can make it from SNOP to a dynamic SNOP, and so that we can do not only from 1 month to 3 months demand estimation, but how we can sense the short-term demand dynamics. When I say short-term demand dynamics, it is primarily driven by few factors like weather pattern. Across India, we have different weather patterns. Our monsoon flows in different time from Kerala to north and northeast, right? So that is one thing, and that affects my overall supply constraints, supplies infrastructure, and also demand to some extent. And then that is one thing. Second thing is the holidays and all that happen across India. We have different kind of holidays in different locations in India, and also unlike West, our holiday is not on the same date and same month, right? In US and all, Christmas is always 25th, but we have Diwali across September, yes, October, November. So in those things, the traditional forecasting algorithm captures to some extent that how that seasonal variation happens, but because our holiday varies always every year, so that aspect become during the short-term demand sensing period, it creates a problem because of these aspects. Last 2 years, my Diwali could be in November. This year, I'm happening in September end, and with these aspects, my demand pattern also varies. People typically want to buy, repair his house or expand his house before such event, right? Such holidays and all. So now to make all these things into our SNOP planning, then that time we devised about 2 years back. Actually, we made this creation of roadmap. First of all, we transformed the current the monthly SNOP into a 3-month one, and then brought in this dynamic aspect of demand sensing, right? So that is what we brought in. So what we did then, coming to the prioritization of technology and data in that case, a couple of data we did not have, couple of we had. We always had historical reference of our holiday information. So the basis on that, we plugged in that holiday information and I identified some amount of ML-based regression-based approach to identify how holiday impact my demand that we quantified. One data we did not have, still we are accumulating, gathering, which is about weather data. Now, weather data is a tricky part because weather focus is also not very accurate, to be frank. I cannot focus beyond 1 week or 10 days, to be frank. That may not be right focus as well. So we have been evaluating that. We found some success in certain pockets of locations. So, and now we are trying to build in at least 3-4 days of weather focus, reasonably good amount, good focused, which we are bringing into our demand sensing module. And that is aiming to provide that dynamic change in demand pattern because of this weather disruption and because of the holiday is also there. That's all these things. So this is how we laid out the foundation, and this is how we have made it a progress. Now, this is where I am tying up with my first point, that understanding businesses top 3 pointers. From there, what we have already as a data and technology infrastructure, based on that, we identified initially what needs to be done. And for anything beyond 1 year, when we need to make this dynamic transformation, that time we already proposed that we need weather data, this data, and all this. And that is what now in the process of bringing and creating overall the dynamic approach of doing the S&OP planning. So that this is just one example. Similarly, we have other examples in logistics also. But anyway, for the sake of time, I will not touch upon now. But this is how typically we proceed in identifying, prioritizing, and reprioritizing data and technology infrastructure need.
Yeah, I think a simple and a very nice way of putting it that way. What gives you the biggest bang for buck as far as the impact to the bottom line is concerned, which also was what Ravindran did talk about in terms of answerability to the board in terms of technology investment. And every time you go for an investment, it's just spent a few crores. Now I need a few more crores. And the CFO is the first person to shoot all of these down.
Correct.
So you have, and in fact, incidentally, some of the things which I did read about in terms of what Amazon is trying to do is pretty interesting in what they have as an experiment. They are trying to put a 3D printer on a truck. And when I get your order, wherever the truck starts moving towards you, and en route it is printing. And by the time it reaches you, your product is printed and ready. So you get a brand new 3D printed product. So I don't know what it will do to your aftermarket supply chains there. A lot of these things would then change, but fortunately they cannot print cement and probably an appliance. So we still would be able to have a large segment of traditional supply chains running. One of the aspects of digitalization also in terms of what I look at in terms of what will happen is that our supply chains have been working pretty well. If we were to look at it, we have been very successful in our supply chains. We have been managing things pretty well. Though people tend to believe that the supply chain cost in India is very high, I believe that is not very true, primarily because if I were to look at it per kilogram cost or a per ton cost in the US versus India, I don't think India is significantly more expensive than any of the developed nations, etc., for whom we compare. I think it's also probably because of a wrong interpretation of the word cost and contribution to GDP. Yeah, as a contribution to GDP, we are very high. We need to bring that down. But as a cost, I don't think we are per se the most expensive supply chain. We are running a very expensive supply chain. So we are doing a number of things which is very good. We have our strengths in reliability in spite of all the black holes that we have in terms of not able to identify where things are. I think, Ravindran, you'll agree with me that you still are on top of things and you will know when your material is arriving and you don't get stockouts that easily.
Yeah, I would say the entire value chain, the entire channel structure is such that people will wait to know of information.
Yes.
Once ordered, it's their right to get the product on time. In fact, before the time.
Yeah, which is what when I was looking at it, we are doing a number of things right without the use of technology. While with technology, these things becomes much more easier for us to do, and we can actually focus on a lot more value-added activities rather than chasing the guy. A lot of us spend a lot of time on phone just follow-ups. Right? The biggest job description for any logistics person is nothing else but follow-up. You need to chase everyone and everyone within that. And I used to make fun of that in my classes. Which brings us into a very, very interesting question for you. We talked about blockchains, we talked about IoTs, we talked about connected devices, and today our supply chains are getting integrated in a very big way. But as we integrate our supply chains, we are also opening ourselves up to cyber attacks. I think it was last month that a large energy giant in the US had to shut down its pipeline operations because of a cyber attack. How many of us are looking actively to protect our digital assets from, and currently we are also discussing the famous Pegasus hack.
Spyware.
It's a real threat when we look at it from the, in the olden days, if I had to hijack a truck, I need to have some gundas coming in the middle of the road and then hijacking a truck. If it is all autonomous, and if I have autonomous driverless vehicles driving all over the place, I can sit anywhere in the world and hijack a truck without you knowing about it in time for you to take any action. So how is it that we can, what are your thoughts when it comes to these kind of problems in our digitalization efforts? Are we geared up? Are we sufficiently cognizant of those risks?
I think, if you have to take my point of view, the word so-called encrypted communication, I don't know what was there with the WhatsApp, all non-encrypted. One of the promise which blockchain does, one of the promise which the blockchain structure does is the protection from the cyber threat. It is the structure of a blockchain is such that, whatever I've learned about it is you can't attack, as you said, you can't steal a truck from midway. If you have to do a structural change, you have to move from the first two to the last two. That's how blockchain are defined as a structure. Now, somebody who has been in IT would have been a much better communicator on it. But whatever I have understood about blockchain is it's difficult to hack or difficult to, despite whatever you have said, one of the biggest product of a blockchain is Bitcoin, which is also a revenue for the people who are working on it. It has not gone through any cyber attack, despite, we have not heard about serious one. It could have transferred its account, but nothing has happened onto that part. But yes, what you are talking about is today we live in an age of data. I'm not just talking about the logistics data, but consumer data. That's the wealth we are talking about. If every organization is spending, almost every unit as a cost per acquisition towards not just selling consumer the product, but also buying those consumer data. Now, today, I think maybe a decade back, it was not that big asset where today it is. Retargeting is one of the biggest assets in the digital world, what we do today. What I really see is the real investment is required there. In a industry level investment, towards how you can be protecting our cyber threats. Can there ever be a 100% solution? I think that would be like a God's creation. That will have no, when you can create, you can always disturb it. Somebody has a right to disturb it. But again, somewhere down the line, there have been enough brains working clockwise and anti-clockwise to create and protect both. But how do you create encrypted communication? I think that's the technology on which everyone has to work on it, because there would be data of consumer, of customers, of storage capacities. I think sometimes that also makes a lot of difference in giving a call onto it. So as an organization, I think there are many organizations who are still not very strong on it, and that's the reason they are giving opportunities to other organizations to win over them. And I think the younger organization are smarter. It is a bigger problem with the conventional organization, because shifting from one to other in any technology aspect is very, very difficult for them. And there are so many young organizations. I'm not talking about young with the turnover size, but young with the number of years they have been into it, because there are a lot of young organizations doing much bigger turnovers than what could have been done by conventional organizations. But there are a lot of transformation happening in organizations. One of the best thing has happened in the last 2 years, I think, and Girish, you would agree with me in many ways, is today you don't have to teach the board and promoters that digital is an asset. I think I have lived those ages where we have to keep convincing the CFOs and the CXOs and the board of the organization that we need to invest on digital, we need to work on digital assets as such. Today, I think that understanding has been very clear on the top of the line. In fact, the flow of the direction is reverse. It is coming from the top that create more digital assets and look for how you can secure it. But the security part, I think something which may not have crossed my mind to a very close, very secure assets, because as a brand we live in protecting our IPs. We look into how our communication cannot be copied, how can we make sure that our communication stand unique, and how my products stand unique for a consumer. I think we work a lot. Maybe as a consumer centric, I work a lot onto it. Surely I am a huge hunger for data. So I am looking for every hook and crook way of getting consumer data so that I can target them. I can make sure that I communicate. I think target is the wrong word nowadays, but we use that. But I can communicate with them, because at the end of the day, it's a consumer choice whether you want to love me, hate me, or have a passionate, unforgivable love for me. Anything can happen for me. So I think cybersecurity is something which is talked about, but as a supply chain, I think it's a missed out action.
Yeah, interesting, because blockchain is essentially a technology which allows you to share information in real time, and everyone has the same picture. So it's one version of the truth that comes in. And blockchain per se is not hackable. Right. But every device that writes into a blockchain can be hacked.
Right.
Which again brings into question as to what is the veracity of the truth in the blockchain if the devices that feed data into blockchain can be hacked. In fact, this is something that we were discussing about in one of our technology. I have a set of people with whom I keep brainstorming on, or rather discussing on these issues on how safe blockchains are. And if there's one major player who owns the blockchain, he can replace all the records and then create a fresh, his version of the truth. The powerful person creates, it becomes like history is written by the victor. So the victor will write his version of the truth. So those are things that will come up. In fact, if I were to take it slightly different to Bhargav, two things. Do you think this is the right time to invest? In fact, it's an audience question also. Should we wait for the pandemic to get over before we invest in technology, or do we start investing in it right now? I think that's a very simple question to answer. But the more important question which I wanted to ask you is also that what are the other technologies that you are looking at and you are getting excited about?
So on the first point, whether we should invest now or after pandemic, I think question should have been invested by now or not. I think that is what I would say, because honestly speaking, there is no way we can evade this technology investment, considering current whatever business you are. I cannot imagine any business without such technology investment is needed. Even if you are not in ERP, at least invest in ERP system to start with. So that is what would be my suggestion, considering the amount of data and transformation that can be done. Now, coming to the evolving technology perspective, because we have discussed about blockchain a bit, I will just touch upon on blockchain to some extent. Yeah, in a way, it is right that individual blockchain device can be hacked, but because the ownership is distributed, so even if it is a hack, but you cannot do everything, all information stolen, right? That is the beauty of blockchain. And only and technically there is no single owner in technical sense in terms of all the information that you are owning. That is one fundamental point. Second point is that now success of blockchain, yeah, in a way it is also one of the overused term, technology, especially, of course, I understand in banking BFSI it is still quite valid in many transactional all these things information, because of the value associated with those transactions. But if you consider it from the supply chain perspective, I don't see it is successful across all functions, all business problems, I would say. Maybe few business problem, I will still say it would be useful, which actually I have seen in my past experience in my earlier organizations, where I was working in General Mills. From the raw material traceability perspective, because the food in the food,
Yes,
that is
yes.
the food for food manufacturing, right? So that is, it is valid. That is, it is really needed. Similarly, that could be helpful in healthcare in those use cases. And why it is helpful? Why it would be helpful in such kind of if you look at blockchain technology perspective, uh, the more the layer of chain, more information you are mining, your data mining power and capacity become humongous, is huge. In case of raw material traceability, that chain is little less, so you do not have to mine enough blockchain, and that way the cost aspect is relatively better. But if you want to use blockchain in your logistics traceability or GPS data, then it is actually the humongous cost. It is, there is no cost benefit in a way, at least at this moment. So we should not, we should use that technology in such a way where the cost benefit will play a big role. So that is a fundamental thing. And that is where people, although people get excited, then they, from that hype cycle, then they immediately they fall down. That is what, that is what is happening with blockchain. And coming to the other areas of things, so most of the technology already people are using in bits and pieces in many cases. At least in the COVID era, use of AR VR we have seen a tremendous in many of our business entities, especially from the perspective of audit, remote audit and all, right? So from the safety angle. So that is, even we are adopting in some of our supply chain activities, AR, VR technology for the remote auditing perspective. And that is two things. One is from the, of course, safety perspective, and also from the workforce optimization perspective, because I do not need people on ground now for those doing those remote and auditing and all, right? So there's a two aspect we are solving through that one of the emerging technology. And from another piece is which is coming a big way, although it came from core manufacturing, which is called digital twin. From the core manufacturing process perspective, it evolved initially, but now it is getting into supply chain 4.0 as well, as a new way of looking at health of your supply chain. So, however, having said that, we have people were still doing simulation earlier. Now I'm using the word simulation, not digital tools. In simulation, supply chain simulation, we have been doing. Even we also did 2-3 years back, looking at difference in the demand pattern, supply pattern, how I can easily transform from here to here, this state to that state. But from that simulation to move to digital twin, the basic additional fundamental need is real-time data feed, and real-time, either real-time or I would say near real-time. It may not be not necessarily be the real-time, near real-time alert and prediction of those same simulation what we did earlier as a diagnostic, right? So that is what the fundamental difference. And that is where, in a way, although we have not built any digital team internally because it's a big concept, but we did something similar to that during that first COVID unlocking phase period in India last year, when it is getting, if you recall, district-wise red, yellow, green, right? So that was changing dynamically, and accordingly, how our routes are getting unlocked, and wherever I am getting restriction on the way. So those kind of quick and is almost near real time alert and prediction and those things we're trying. We did it as not like a digital twin, but now I am feeling that if we can bring the digital twin concept in that aspect, this kind of disruption in future or maybe any other disruption can be solved in a much faster way. So this is what my take would be for upcoming technological changes that I am thinking of at this moment.
You're essentially looking at digital twin as one of the exciting technologies that you would like to explore. There are a couple of other things which have also, in fact, there are a number of interesting digital technologies which are out there which can be used quite well. Today, we are all talking about sustainable and sustainable manufacturing practices. One thing which can be of major help there is something called as a digital thread, which tracks the product from raw material to finished good and to end of life. I think Ravindran would be one of the people who would have to, if it comes in, would be a user of digital thread, because final disposal of the product is a major challenge. There are some other interesting technologies which I have been seeing. Edge computing is one of them, where you use the power of computing right at the point of sale, so that demand sensing or actual shaping happens at the point of touch points rather than remotely at a head office. Things like this are happening, but it's quite interesting to see which of them will be coming through, which will not, because as you rightly mentioned, they are at various points of the hype cycle. They still have to go through that disillusionment phase before they can start finding out the real level. And translate into actual action within the commercial organizations. Not many commercial organizations are willing to be guinea pigs in terms of, and they should not also. In fact, I always believe that whatever we do, which is where that the twin strategy is something that we should adopt. One strategy which is for our established business, which is not rocking the boat, but a small, innovative set of practices which we fine-tune based on our own requirements, which can be nurtured for the future. If I were to bring this back to you, Ravindran, a lot of us are also going to look at investing in technology. As a user, when you look at these things, how do you measure the success of digitalization?
Very, very tricky question. Different stakeholders need different answer on this question.
Yes. I think the only one we are all sure about is the CFO.
Look, there are different aspects to it. One of as a marketing, as a marketing head, I have to look into what is the ROI of my investments goes into, right? Whether to invest or not to invest, has been in debate ever since we have evolved as an industrialization company. Organizations have been, if you talk about digital, I think one of the success is one of the recent understanding of success measure is number of consumer you can touch base upon, then come the efficiency part is cost of acquiring consumer. That's just the second part of it. But one of the biggest success and which is translating into monetary success in a big way on the stock market is how many consumer you are able to win. Zomato is the latest example, which is doing trends all across. But there are, I think I'm understating by giving just one brand name. I should not do it. But one of the biggest example, without owning an asset, just owning the consumer trust, you can create value for the brand, for the technology, for the stakeholder, for the shareholder, everyone. So there was a time from where consumer was God to be served, and now consumers have become an asset. I think that's the power of digital. There was a time when organization used to spend maximum time in catering the channels, the channels to serve consumer, to build their infrastructure, to keep them motivated, take them for a foreign trips, take them for a relaxed trips, take them for a technology trips, explain them what is ERP, even it doesn't matter to them in their system, still explain them why we are investing in ERPs. To come to a level today, which is again, I may, please pardon me, since being in marketing, most of the time I end up in jargon, again, D2C comes in. I think the D2C has been in trend only looking at how it has added value to the, at the end of the day, we have moved on from the business saying that by selling product, you can make money. It is also to take care of your assets, which could be movable, immovable. And one of the strong assets is a consumer assets in a digital form. And one of the biggest, there was a, 4 years down the line, there was one word that success of digital was viral videos. Can you make rage out of your communication? That was the digital success, maybe 3 years, 4 years down the line. If your digital communication can create a wave in the society saying that, whoa, what a brand this is, who can create such a lovely communication. That was a success measure 3 years, 4 years down the line. Today, by hook or crook, can you bring consumer trust to you? And can you bring back customer again and again back to you? Because one-time acquisition and then you retain it is the only way you can create efficiency out of the acquisition. So I think one of the biggest assets, one of the common problem in most of the organization is we also add cost to it. Cost of acquiring consumer is also part of success story or a failure story, and that's how I'm being reviewed. So I would be reviewed by my management saying that what was the cost per acquisition, and that's how most of our decision was taken on cost per reach, whether we should invest on television or on digital or on any other asset. One thing has come, one thing which has really created transformation in understanding of most of the people is value of consumer. We used to value consumer, but as a God, as a to be served. From there to creating value back to the company. I think that is a transformation which has happened in the industry, and that is changing the way digital promotion has been taken on. Nobody wants over the top jarring communication. People want subtle, convincing, real life communication, but trust. Whatever a brand is communicating and whatever consumer is expecting is being bridged. So I think that digital bridge and whatever value that can create for a brand, one of the monetary value is the share market, and the non-monetary, it could be non-monetary, but on a physical way is how consumer accept a brand in different categories. I think I will consider these two as a success of consumer and a digital at that point of time.
Yes, it was indeed a very, very difficult question to put a finger on, because perspectives change, and when the perspectives change, what is good for one is not good for the other. Bhargav, if I were to come back to you with another of those issues that trouble a lot of people, I go back to that olden days when we had a VHS versus Betamax, or iPhone versus iTunes versus Zune. Some people did bet on Zune and it got wiped out, or some people went for Betamax and lost technology has that particular risk that the technology that we invest in today might find itself out of flavor very quickly because something else has come up. When you start, as a technology professional, when you start looking at these technologies, how do you evaluate them? What is the kind of, how do you take that bet? Because again, in India, we have a problem of, blaming someone for the wrong choice. In other countries, we don't blame the person, but here everything is personalized. It again is a bigger risk in India. So how do you go out on a limb and say, this is the technology we should be looking at?
Yeah, actually, you're rightly said. And that is why, before I answer to that question, one fundamental point, at least the every organization need to keep in mind, or maybe they should be bold enough to keep in within their ecosystem, is ability for experiment to fail. Okay, that is what one thing is needed. Otherwise, what will happen? You will always go for trusted and proven technology, and you start something big bang, and then the big bang, and 2 years down the line you realize that okay, this this is obsolete. So that is a fundamental shift in mindset is needed. That is first point. First point I would like to say, and this mindset has to come from the top leadership. That is, whether I say or my peers say, or people will not, may not be taking. Of course, they will take our point of view, no doubt, but still, ultimately, every experiment that fails also associated with the cost, right? So that amount of risk appetite needs to be there in management board discussion. So that is one thing. So if that is there, then what typically, and nowadays what I have seen, at least even if I know 2, 3, 4 years down the line, before this risk appetite was not there in our organization, Indian organizations, but now people are realizing that without keeping in pace with technological advancement, it will be difficult to sustain and too difficult to gain that competitive advantage. So that is, I think that mindset shift has happened. Now, considering that thing has happened, now it is our job that that we should not misuse that risk, right? We should be also cognizant about the cost that might be incurred even if something goes wrong. Keeping these things in mind, we try to evaluate technology with respect to the use case aspect. Actually, looking at the use case where I'm planning to use it. From the example, from the perspective of because we are discussing about supply chain. Within supply chain, if I consider, let's say, core manufacturing is part of supply chain. I'm just, because in some industries we consider core manufacturing also part of overall supply chain value chain. And this is where you mentioned about edge computing some time back, right?
Yes.
So I was skipping that part because from traditional supply chain perspective, core manufacturing, sometimes people take it separately, but that is where the adoption of edge technology is very much important within the core manufacturing perspective, because the reason is why to make your supply chain healthy, your machine has to run efficiently after all, right? And also to keep pace with your demand and product portfolio. My product portfolio might change every 2-3 years, but I cannot change my machines. I have to use the same one with the same throughput, and also maybe some little bit of change in terms, so to match for those new product range and all. Now, to make all these things happen, I need to keep in track of health of the machine, performance of the machine, right? Now, traditionally, what has been done, we had all the DCS systems and all these things. They were having data, and they're storing somewhere in historian and all. And but to mine, that is another humongous set of data stream. And to mine that data, you need a good amount of network connectivity so that you can process and do the advanced level of analytics. Now, that is not possible in majority of our old infrastructure, most of the old and traditional manufacturing houses, because of the network connectivity issue that was not designed for this kind of things back then. That is one thing. That is where now this edge computing is playing a big role, because it is giving me capacity capability to analyze those data at that machine location.
Yes.
Itself, right? So that is what I am doing. So
Yes.
now this is where this is an interesting use case, and this is if you bring in such kind of point of view to the management, then management understand. They understand, okay, this is my infrastructure issue. I have not built this infrastructure, keeping these things, future things in my mind. Now, at the same time, I cannot simply invest on creating that networking infrastructure and all these things. And what is the best other way? So that is where we play a role, identifying what could be the right technology for that use case with minimum investment. So that is how things needs to be taken care of. This is something what I am explaining. Actually, it is not a experiment to fail. It is a success. But there are certain could be some experiment who could be failure also. Few things could be in a way maybe what we are conceptualizing one aspect on somewhat similar to edge computing only for our sales force who goes into different territory across India, and they carry some app nowadays, right? So all this app, and through this their Salesforce app, they try to get an information with regard to here the customer feedback and what he is looking for in next week or next month, what kind of demand he might think of, what kind of product he might think of. So those kind of information he was traditionally collecting. Now with that information, now I know for that I know that that Salesforce person is associated with that territory, and that territory is associated with this many dealers and other retailers. Now that information already I know, and now with that information I will be already having some insights, right? Now we are conceptualizing something from the edge computing perspective, again edge computing plus analytics, that if my Salesforce person has all this information in tip of his hand, and when he meets a dealer or retailer person in that locality, can we help him in giving him some talking point that, okay, for this dealer, this retailer, this is what his traditional problem, and probably our analytics insight is telling that if we can address this issue, let's say delivery commitment or some amount of discount promotion margin and all these things, cash discount and all, then this dealer could we can increase my volume from this dealer by some X percentage. This kind of insight we are trying to provide on the go on the Salesforce. However, this is where I would say the failure might also happen, because these are the information which is very relationship driven kind of business also at that time, at that location, right? So may not be 100% accurate. Sometimes I might fail also, but still the management should have this appetite in identifying those right use cases, where to what and what kind of next level of technology needs to be addressed.
Thanks, Mark. That's very interesting. Yes, the management should. In fact, that's one of the interesting aspects of what you also did mention. We cannot replace a machine, but we can definitely replace a person. And somewhere we seem to forget that supply chains are not just machines; they are also people. And it is this mixture of people and the machines which will actually create value for us going forward. And it is how easily we facilitate this interaction of people with machines and data and computing, which will give us the leverage to create the supply chains of the future. So when you're building a digital bridge, the foundation will still remain people. The foundation will still remain us, and it will be around us. Ravindran talked about customer centricity and putting the people, the requirements of the customer first. Absolutely. The customer is not a machine. He's not an algorithm. Though we are trying to reduce the customer also to an algorithm. I doubt if that is easily possible, but yes, that's if it's people first and if it is people centric, then everything around the supply chain and the technology needs to be people centric and has to be people friendly. I thank I thank my speakers, especially Bhargav and Ravindran, for the insights that you have brought in. I would now invite Shashwat to take over. Incidentally, we also did answer all the customer questions, customer. I'm becoming customer overhang.
I did hallucination on you.
Yes. I invite Shashwat to take over. Shashwat, over to you. Ajay?
Yeah, I believe Mr. Somani must be occupied somewhere else, so is not able to log in and the thing. Let me extend my thanks to Mr. Bhargav Datta and Mr. Ravindran for extending their time for this session and giving such a valuable inputs to the audience as well. And you are correct, Mr. Girish, we have taken up all the questions which have been raised by the attendees, not the customers like you are. So those were the attendees whose questions we have well taken off. And there are a few which were there with us on the email. So we'll share it with Mr. Datta and Mr. Ravindran. So if we'll get any answers from them, so we'll share it with the attendees over the email as well.
You would love it.
Right?
Sure.
Right. Thanks a lot to all the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Girish.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bhargav. Thank you, Ravindra.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.